President Trump has a New Year's message for the world. America wants fewer illegal drugs, an end to wars, and more peace and prosperity. But don't be fooled. He will do what it takes to get there. He put Iran on serious notice yesterday.
I hope they're not trying to build up again, because if they are, we're going to have no choice but very quickly to eradicate that buildup. So I hope Iran is not trying to build up, as I've been reading that they're building up weapons and other things. And if they are, they're not using the sites that we obliterated, but they're using possibly different sites.
Iran's regime facing big problems at home, massive protests there, the biggest in 3 years over the country's horrific economy and continued political repression. Iranian security forces responding with batons and tear gas last night. Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett posting this rallying cry to the protesters.
The Iranian people have a glorious past, and they can have an even more glorious future. That future depends on each and every one of you. So to all the brave men and women now rising up across your country, all the nations of the free world stand with you in your just struggle. Change is possible.
Iran, as well as Hamas, was top of the list on the agenda when Prime Minister Netanyahu visited Mar-a-Lago yesterday. Lucas Tomlinson has more from West Palm Beach, Florida. It's been a busy holiday week, Lucas.
It sure has, Julie. Good morning. It was the 5th time the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited with President Trump in the United States, this time at Mar-a-Lago. It's also looking to be the last foreign leader to visit with President Trump this year. And any potential reported rift between the two leaders seemed to be put to rest yesterday when the president said this about Hamas.
We talked about Hamas and we talked about disarmament. And they're going to be given a very short period of time to disarm. If they don't disarm, as they agreed to do, they agreed to it, and then they'll be held to pay.
There's nothing subtle there, Julie. Now, today, the Treasury Department announcing new sanctions on 10 individuals and entities based in Venezuela and Iran, including a Venezuelan company that has contributed to Iran's drone trade with Venezuela. The announcement comes one day after President Trump admitted the U.S. was behind the strike, destroying suspected drug boats moored in Venezuela earlier this month, marking the first strikes ashore. U.S. forces have now launched strikes in Venezuela, Nigeria, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, Iran, Iraq, the Caribbean, and Eastern Pacific this year. That's part of the president's Peace Through Strength initiative. Netanyahu was the second world leader to visit the winter White House in as many days. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine sat down with our colleague Brett Baer in an exclusive interview and reacted to Trump saying Putin wants Ukraine to succeed. Here's the interview.
You don't agree with that?
No, it's not about agree. I don't trust Russians, and they don't want. I don't trust Putin, and he doesn't want success for Ukraine.
And combat operations continue in Syria. Just a few minutes ago, the U.S. Central Command, responsible for all American forces in the Middle East, said U.S. and partnered forces, likely Syrian forces, have been battling ISIS and have killed or captured 25 ISIS fighters in the past 2 weeks since those American airstrikes hit 70 ISIS targets in Syria after those 2 American soldiers from the Iowa National Guard and their American interpreter were killed this month. Right. Julie?
Lucas Tomlinson, thank you. The Wall Street Journal editorial board calls yesterday's meeting a showcase of the Trump-Netanyahu united front. An excerpt: if Iran accumulates enough missiles, it could overwhelm the air defenses of Israel and other U.S. allies, even without a nuclear weapon. A united front on Iran is the best way to pressure the regime to come to a deal limiting its nuclear and missile programs so Israel doesn't have to strike again. Some of Trump's advisors would like him to restrain Israel across all fronts. But Israel has taken from the war of October 2023 one lesson above all. It can never again allow jihadists to reign and build up military power with impunity on its borders. That's a policy worthy of U.S. support. Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump, joins me now. She is also Vice President of National Security and Foreign Policy for the Heritage Foundation. Thank you very much for talking to us today.
Good morning, Julie. Good to be with you.
Let's begin with Iran, because the threat is real, and the president is not mincing words when he says that they will attack again. Where do you think they're currently enriching their weapons, considering that many of their sites were demolished by the United States? But the president says that there are other states that are still up and running.
Right. And this has been the president's bottom line, both in his first term and his second term, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. No. That's the fundamental national security issue that concerns the United States. And so that's why he acted in the B-2 bomber strike in June that was so decisive. But he said at the time, we're going to assess, we're going to see what they're doing. If they do the right thing and don't reconstitute, then we can consider the matter closed. If they do the wrong thing, which they've been doing for 50 years, by the way, and continue to try to pursue a nuclear weapon, we know we can go in and strike. And they can't do anything about it. They don't have air defenses to stop us. So that's really our mission there.
Iran and Russia are very similar. They cannot be trusted. Last year, the Office of the National Intelligence Director reported that with continued enrichment, Iran already had enough fissile material to make more than a dozen nuclear weapons. Maybe more alarming, the Islamic Republic's conventional arsenal, a vast array of more than 3,000 ballistic missiles with a variety of ranges. And it has successfully tested at least one to a distance of 2,000 kilometers, more than 1,200 miles to be exact. That is capable of reaching inside Israel's closest border. And that is exactly why these meetings between Trump and Netanyahu are absolutely critical, because as we know, Israel will never stand back again after October 7th and allow for Iran to have its hands in killing more of their people.
Exactly. And that's why the threat from Hamas is intolerable after October 7th. That can't be tolerated. But then also, as you're just reporting, the direct threat from Iran. And so we've had two engagements with Israel and Iran over the course of the 2-year war with Hamas, where Iran launched these massive missile strikes on Israel. Fortunately, Israel and the United States, our exquisite joint missile defense capabilities, fought those off, but it's a real danger. And so, no, I think what we saw was a great show of unity from the Prime Minister and the President yesterday. Right. There's a cottage industry of left-leaning media, certainly not you, but media who want to see a rift. They want to see friction. They report these disagreements. It's just not real. Having been in the room with both of them, they are absolutely in lockstep on this issue.
As they should be. Victoria Coates, thank you so much for talking to us, and Happy New Year to you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.